34, 6, 7, 8.
Hey, what's up guys? So, Uniden has just released firmware version 1.37 for the R1 and the R3 radar detectors. It brings a number of nice improvements, new features, as well as some bug fixes. Now, the R3 is actually going to get some more features because some of the features are GPS related, some of the features are not GPS related, and those ones are going to apply to the R1 as well. Now, there's basically 5 key areas where the detectors have been improved. They've improved the font on the display to make it larger, easier to read. There's now an auto-dimming functionality, so the detector can automatically get brighter in the daytime and dimmer at night for you. There's now a frequency announcement on Ka band to let you know the exact frequency of the signal that you're detecting.
34, 6, 7, 8.
If you encounter overspeed alerts from like speed cameras, for example, you now have the ability to mute those alerts. And then there's also been some improvements to the GPS lockouts. Now, the update software, that's been improved as well to basically streamline and simplify the update process. So with that said, let's go ahead and go over some of the details as far as all of the different improvements that we have here with 1.37. Now, I know a lot of you guys are on RDF, and 1.36 was actually released a little while ago on the forums, and Uniden was initially planning on releasing 1.36. But as we were testing it, and people were running it, we found a number of other improvements and changes that they wanted to make. And so 1.37 has got a couple changes over 1.36, and I'm going to be covering those as well for those of you guys who are coming from 1.36 instead of 1.31, which up to this point has been the kind of the current public version of the firmware. Now, starting off with the display, the font has been made larger with 1.37 over 1.31, which is really nice because it means it's easier to now read a signal at a glance and identify the frequency. When you're driving, you can just glance up, see what it is, and easy to read. It doesn't affect, your mode display or the time display, things like that. It's just the frequency display itself when you get an alert. Now, speaking of the display, there's also now an automatic brightness functionality, where basically the detector can get brighter in the daytime and then darker at night for you without you having to go up and press the brightness button on the detector, which is really nice. The way that it works is because there is no ambient light sensor in the detector, it's actually relying on GPS, because GPS gives you the time, and based on the time, it can figure out when to go brighter and when to go darker. And so the idea is you go into the detector and you kind of basically set sunrise and sunset times effectively, and you say, at this time I want the detector to get brighter, at that time I want the detector to get dimmer. And then once you do that, you also select the levels of what brightness level you want it to get to and what brightness level or kind of darkness level you want it to go to at night as well. So you now have new options in the menu in order to adjust this. A quick note, in order to actually go in and change the auto dimming settings, you first have to go into the detector. There's a couple options for the display. Make sure that you go in and select automatic display brightness. Once you do that, then you'll have all the new options in the menu. If you don't select this and you're set on something else like just standard brightness, it's not going to show up. So just a quick heads up for when you actually go in and start messing with the settings. Now, a quick note about the auto-dimming functionality. There was actually a bug that was discovered on the forums the other day where if you have it enabled and then you have the scan mode enabled, it can actually kind of mess up the look of the display, and a number of people were able to reproduce this issue. Now, what was cool is Uniden saw this, and then they implemented the fix in 1.37. It was actually introduced in 1.36 and fixed in 1.37, and then the firmware update was released really quickly afterwards. Now, the time frame between when the bug was actually initially posted on the forums and when the update was delivered, 2 days. 2 days between the bug being posted and Uniden making the fix available. That's an incredible turnaround, so hats off to you guys at Uniden for listening to your customers and quickly implementing the required fixes as needed. That is awesome. Another new option that's now available in the menu, if you take a look, we now have an option for Ka band frequency announcement. So basically now when you pick up a signal on Ka band, the detector can actually verbally announce what frequency that signal is.
33, 8, 0, 6, 34, 6, 7, 9, 35, 5, 1, 7.
This information can be really nice to immediately know exactly what brand of radar gun is being used, whether it's MPH, Stalker, Decatur, Custom, etc., to help you identify, what type of police department is being used, if it's a legitimate alert versus a false alert. Maybe there's multiple antennas in use, so multiple cars, a lot of different things. And so having the frequency announcements on Ka band can be really, really useful. Now, this doesn't apply to K-band, and a lot of people in the forums are asking why not. You know, maybe I see a lot more K-band than I do on Ka. The thing about Ka is you don't really get a lot of false alerts, and knowing the frequency on Ka is very useful. On K-band, not as much. There's a lot of overlap between legitimate and false alerts. Maybe in some instances, maybe you can tell like an Acura if it's 24196 or something like that, but for the most part, it's not really useful. So at this time, there's no frequency announcements for K-band. It's just for Ka-band. Now, one thing that I like, the way that they've implemented this voice announcement is you can have the detector say Ka-band, you can have it say the frequency, you can have it say both, and you can kind of mix and match depending on, you know, if you go into the settings, you've got your voice right here. This will make it say Ka-band. And the Ka frequency announcements will basically announce the frequency. So you can kind of mix and match as far as what you want the detector to say or not. Now, one change that's been made with 1.37 over 1.36, there's actually two very small changes to the Ka-band frequency announcements. The first one has to do with balancing audio volume levels. You see, the detector would, you know, give you loud beeps, but then the verbal announcement of the frequency was a lot quieter. And so what they wanted to do was make it louder, so it's now better balanced in terms of audio levels with both the beeps as well as the frequency announcements. The second thing is with 1.36, there was a bit of a delay between when the frequency announcement was done talking and when the ramp up, the beeps, then resumed alerting. And, you know, when you've got a signal going on, you really want to know what the ramp up is, the signal strength, and all this kind of stuff so that you can quickly tell how strong the signal is, if it's getting closer, or any of that type of information. And there was a bit of a gap between when the frequency was speaking and when the beeps resumed in 1.36. And so one of the changes with 1.37 now is that the detector will begin resuming beeping immediately as soon as it's done talking and announcing the frequency display, which is announcing the frequency, which is a really nice change.
34, 6, 7, 9. 34, 6, 7, 8.
Speaking of the frequency announcements, it will beep for you first to give you an indication of the signal strength and whatnot. Then it'll announce the frequency, and then the beeps will resume. So cool way, the way that's done. Now, the next change has to do with speed camera alerts. So the idea is before, when you encounter a speed camera and you're going past it, there's actually no way of manually muting that signal. And now with 1.37, we do have the ability to manually mute speed cam alerts, which is really nice. Red light camera alerts are a little bit different. You can delete those, but you can't currently mute them. That's actually going to be coming via a future firmware update. So this one includes speed camera muting, but not red light camera muting. Now, the next change has to do with GPS lockouts. There's been some improvements with GPS lockouts. One of the issues that people were encountering sometimes is, let's say you're in an area with a lot of K-band falses. Say a shopping center, for example, with tons and tons of automatic door openers. Well, the detector can actually lock out multiple signals at once, but it's currently capped, well, it was, at 5 different frequency ranges in one GPS location, which means if you have a whole variety of signals at different frequencies, if there's more than 5 different frequency signals, the detector is not actually going to be locking them out. You're not going to be able to do that. So now they've upped it to 8 signals at different frequencies, and so now you have the ability of locking out all of the different signals if you're in an area with a whole bunch of different signals. And of course, if you move to a different area or anything like that, that starts to create different lockouts, of course. So that's one nice change that they've made, is basically if you're in one area, you can now lock out more signals to make sure that you can lock out everything. There's also been a bug fix with GPS lockouts on Ka-band. Earlier on, you used to be able to lock out Ka-band, but then they removed that feature. Now, there was an issue where if you used to have some lockouts on Ka-band, the detector could actually potentially still lock out those signals. I actually ran into this issue in testing where I was testing and all of a sudden my detector, I see it's locked out a signal on Ka-band, and I'm like, what the heck? This was with 1.36, and so with 1.37, they've just gone back and cleaned stuff up so that if you did have any lockouts on Ka-band, that will no longer still apply with 1.37. Now, as far as updating the detector, the update software itself has been improved as well. For both the R1 and the R3, there's now just one file that you need to basically load into the update software, and it covers everything from your firmware to your new voices, or if you have the R3, that one file also includes your GPS database. And so pretty much one file, hit download essentially, and it'll take a couple minutes and it will update your detector completely, which is very, very nice. If your detector, of course, can't be read by the computer, make sure that you download the driver software on Uniden's website. That's a common thing that people encounter. Also, another thing is make sure that you do have a micro USB cable. It needs to be one that can communicate data, not just power. If you're having any issues with the cable, or if you need one, I'll put a link in the video description to where you can get the proper cable. And as far as the update software itself, there's a new version of the update software to kind of simplify the updating process. So I'll make sure that link is down in the video description for you guys as well to download the newest version of the firmware update. Now, one quick thing that Uniden always mentions, and it is something that I would recommend, is once you update the software, make sure you do a factory reset and then reapply your different settings. That way everything takes properly. I've noticed some issues, especially with 1.36 we kind of encountered. We haven't seen the same issues with 1.37, but it's kind of a good practice, and you can always just go into your detector and run through your different settings and just kind of make a mental note as far as how you have it programmed, and then just go back in and reprogram it. If you need any help as far as programming, I'll put a link in the video description to my tutorial videos, as well as the update information on my website that includes all these new settings and whatnot. Other than that, that's a look at 1.37 and what all it includes for both the R1 and the R3. You can find all the information both on RDF as well as on Uniden's website, and I'll have links to all that down in the video description. So awesome. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you guys have found this helpful. Let me know if you have any questions, and I'll see you guys later.